Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. It's time to round out Patron Week, something I forgot to mention was going on last episode, because I guess I was really excited to talk about Dark Signers. Anyway, last month's Quasar Commander requested I cover the Egyptian gods and all their glory, and for this month, they wanted to keep the theme going with one of the original trio's pastiches. Today, we're covering the Sacred Beasts. Released in the 2006 core set Shadow of Infinity, these nefarious knockoffs served as one of the driving forces of evil in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, first being used by Kagemaru, looking to regain his youth and power, then later by Yubel, who cranked up their already impressive might to 11. However, in paper, they lacked a certain factor. That factor being playability. Out of the three, only Haman saw any kind of meaningful play, acting as a very fun tech choice for Crystal Beasts. But with very little additional support, these three were little more than curious oddities that would be revisited by rambunctious duelists looking to graft them onto sundry continuous spells, traps, or fiend monster cards that were released over the years. And all of that came to a resounding crescendo with the 2020 Structure Deck polls held in the OCG, where duelists voted on which theme would get some extra support and some much needed polish. People voting to add cards to a format. I wonder where I've heard that before. But before we get into all that, let's assemble the spirit keys so we can unleash the beasts, see how they execute their reign of terror, then see what dual spirits work best for our devious diet. It's time to slay our enemies with Sacred Beasts. But before we continue, a quick reminder to please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed my content so far. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers, and there's no better way to get there than on our duel runners. Our next stop is 40k, which means Leo and Luna Explained, where we'll be covering Ancient Fairy Dragon's companions, the Power Tool Dragons, Morphtronics, and any other cards that are more than meets the eye. We've also got our Discord, where some people are taking poison damage from coffee? We gotta find a better bean source. I'm also on Twitch, where you can join me for viewer duels, progression polls pools, and chaos draft pools for the time being. And if you've enjoyed my work so far and you have a few bucks to spare, I'd super appreciate it if you'd consider joining my YouTube membership program or my Patreon. A couple dollars gets you that YouTube membership, which gives you access to my monthly schedule so you know what I'm making. For $5, you can join my Patreon and get early access to all the videos that I make. And for $10, you can vote alongside your fellow patrons for a video I make every month. And bonus, each patron gets us closer to one of these milestones. Thank you all so much for watching, and now, back to the video. So, what's the deal with Sacred Beasts? Well, they're all level 10, they can't be normal summoned or set, and can only be special summoned from the hand by sending 3 of something from the field to the grave. And it's different for each beast. Other than that, they're completely different from one another. But, as it turns out, this isn't exactly unheard of. Like with the Egyptian gods and the Earthbound Immortals, they're tied together more by their anime presence and general flavor, rather than by mechanical synergy. In fact, without the help of their newer cards, that'd still be the case for Sacred Beasts. But we'll get into more about that later on. Also, their names are all based on figures in Judeo-Christian texts. 3 of them are angels, Uriah being derived from Uriel, Raviel from Raziel, and Armatael is Amatael, with Haman being associated with Haman from the Book of Esther. Not quite sure if anything about these names informs their effects or designs, so I'll leave it to those who are more familiar with the source material to share with the class. For now, let's start with our 3 headliners, the first of which being Uriah, Lord of Searing Flames, a fire pyro monster with 0 attack and defense that must be special summoned from the hand by sending 3 face-up trap cards you control to the grave. This card gains 1000 attack for each continuous trap in your grave, and once per turn, you can target a set spell or trap card your opponent controls and destroy that target, and neither player can activate spell or trap cards in response to this effect's activation. This is kind of a funny subversion of Slifer the Sky Dragon, basing its attack on how loaded your grave is, rather than having to worry about your hand size, while being a bane to back row instead of 2000 or less attack point monsters. In fact, I'm this close to saying it outclasses Slifer in just about every regard, but unless you're some kind of stall deck extraordinaire, when was the last time you had 3 face-up trap cards just lying around? Seriously, unless you're playing some kind of trap monster turbo deck, your winning streak isn't going to be very continuous. Next is Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder, a light thunder monster with 4,000 attack and defense that must be special summoned from the hand by sending 3 face-up continuous spells you control to the grave. If this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the grave, inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent, and while this card is in face-up defense position, monsters your opponent controls can't target monsters for attacks, except this one. Once again, we've got a little bit of a Mirror Universe Raw situation on our hands. Instead of spending 1,000 life points to destroy a monster, if you destroy a monster by battle, your opponent takes 1,000 damage. And where Raw's Sphere mode can't be attacked, a defense position Hamon is the only monster that can be attacked. So we're already seeing a marked improvement over Uriah. Continuous spells can be played face up immediately, so you don't have to wait a turn to flip them up. Its stat line doesn't require any setup, and is super strong. And while the effects aren't going to rock the boat too much, having extra burn on a huge body that can also run interference on your smaller monsters if need be is super helpful. Just make sure you get them a map before you send them out, because otherwise they're gonna get lost. Because they're the Lord of Striking Thunder. The last member of the trio is Raviel, Lord of Phantasms, a Dark Fiend monster with 4,000 attack and defense that must be special summoned from the hand by tributing 3 Fiend monsters. Each time your opponent normal summons a monster, special summon a Phantasmal token, which is a level 1 Dark Fiend monster with 1,000 attack and defense, but it can't declare an attack. And once per turn, you can tribute a monster to have Raviel gain attack equal to the tributed monster's original attack until the end of the turn. Those Phantasmal tokens make prime fodder for this should they survive, but you can tribute any monster for this effect, so Raviel has the potential to get super big. And to keep with the Egyptian god parallels, this is kind of like a mini version of Obelisk's effect to tribute 2 monsters to wipe away all of your opponent's monsters. But hey, at least when Raviel does it, it can attack in the same turn. It might not be as bombastic as Obelisk, but it's still pretty good at unravieling your opponent's field. Now, putting together 3 Fiends for Raviel's summon is kind of a chore, but thankfully we have a little help to move things along with Phantasmal Martyrs, a normal spell that can only be activated if you have 2 or more cards in hand, and if you control either Uriah or Hamon. You send your entire hand to the grave to special summon 3 Phantasmal Martyr tokens, and while it sounds a lot like the tokens made by Raviel, and they do share a lot of characteristics, these have 0 attack and defense, not 1,000. Oh, and I guess these tokens can attack for all the good they'll do. So you go through all the effort of having summoned, let's say Hamon, because the idea of fielding Uriah at this point is too much for me to stomach. You gather a bunch of continuous spells, send them all to the grave, and now you have one of the monsters you need to activate Phantasmal Martyrs. And let's just go ahead and assume you have Phantasmal Martyrs and another card in hand that you need to activate it. You play Martyrs, pitch the other card, make 3 tokens, and now you have an empty hand. Without some kind of additional effect, you won't have a Raviel in hand to actually use those tokens for their intended purpose. Look, I know anime cards can be off the rails. You don't want to accidentally apply something that was made to fit a climactic battle in the story and end up warping competitive events, but this takes the version from the anime, which asks you discard 2 cards instead of your entire hand, and makes it support for a completely different archetype, Infernity. I mean, it empties your hand and gives you a ton of tokens to work with. They're even fiends, I can't make this stuff up. But, as it turns out, for those willing to brave the trial of summoning all 3 sacred beasts, you can be granted one of the most powerful monsters ever printed, so long as we look purely at potential attack power. Archetype, the Chaos Phantasm. It's a level 12 Dark Fiend fusion monster with 0 attack and defense. Its listed requirements are Uriah, Hamon, and Raviel, but you don't use polymerization. You special summon Archetype by banishing all 3 of the component monsters you control. It can't be destroyed by battle, and Archetype gains 10,000 attack during your turn only. So if having a minimum of 8,000 points of damage on board, presuming your grave was banished, putting Uriah at 0, you can convert those into a 10,000 attack behemoth, but only half the time. If your opponent has a Waboku, or a way to stop your attack, or just has a defense position monster, then your opponent's gonna have a chance to punch through Archetype during their turn, and they aren't gonna make it pretty for you. However, it is a must first be special summoned kind of monster, so you could always just link away or otherwise dispose of Archetype, then bring them back when it's most convenient. But I don't know, are you really telling me we have to go through all the effort of summoning 3 avatars of darkness, protecting them long enough to have them all on the field at the same time, contact fuse them, and then babysit it? Archetype really talks a big game, but deep down, they're nothing but a big zero. So for a long time, this was kind of the state of the archetype. Very flashy, high stats, but were difficult to summon, had no protection, and didn't have the robust support needed to take on the higher tables. But now, with recent advances in chaos theory, a new infrastructure has been built around these terrible titans. And we'll start off by talking about their new support monsters. They don't have a unifying name, so I'm going to group these next 4 together as the Lesser Beasts. They're all Dark Fiend monsters with 0 attack and defense, and their primary goal is to help get the Sacred Beasts onto the field while providing some other utility effects. First is Chaos Summoning Beast, a level 1 monster which can be tributed to special summon any of the Sacred Beasts from your hand, ignoring summoning conditions. You can also banish this card from your grave to add a Fallen Paradise from your deck to your hand. We'll go over that card in just a bit, but let's just say, there's a reason Mound of the Bound creator isn't making it into this video's tech pick section. It also performs the incredible feat of making the summon of your Sacred Beasts relatively painless. It turns out being able to dispose of set back row and dealing extra burn damage in battle is a lot better when you don't have to jump through archaic hoops to make it happen. It also looks like a dead version of Altergeist Meluseek, and hey, that is fine by me. I hate those little things. Dark Beckoning Beast is a level 2 monster, and when normal summoned, you can add any of the Sacred Beasts, or a card that specifically lists any of them in its text from your deck to your hand, except a copy of itself. This means you can set up the summon of Chaos Summoning Beast, or you can grab the Sundry Spell and Trap support that's coming up in a bit. And during your main phase, you can normal summon a Fiend monster with 0 attack and defense in addition to your normal summoner set. So if you have any of your other Lesser Beasts in hand, you can deploy them after getting the search for even more value. Or if you have the additional tribute material for it, you could use the additional summon to bring out Yugioh. See, there's the synergy. I was beginning to think they slapped those two together for little to no reason. Good thing I was totally proven wrong. Chaos Core is a level 3 monster, and when either player activates a card or effect that targets this card, or when your opponent's monster targets this card for an attack as a quick effect, you can send up to 1 each of the Sacred Beasts from your hand and or deck to the grave, and if you do, place a Phantasm counter on this card for each card sent to the grave this way, and if you place at least 1, you take no battle damage this turn. That affects a hard once per turn, but if Chaos Core would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can remove a Phantasm counter from this card instead, and that can be used as many times per turn as you want. That seems very unhelpful, and unless you're looking to use the new fusion monster we have access to, then yeah, it kind of is. But since we can trigger it ourselves by targeting it with our own effects, it's not like it's entirely dependent on our opponent's actions. Though if we need to keep a blocker on board, this also has the upside of deterring attacks if your opponent knows what you're up to. It's not the core of your strategy, but it can help. Our last Lesser Beast is Dark Summoning Beast, a level 5 monster that you can tribute to special summon one of the Sacred Beasts from your hand or deck, ignoring summoning conditions. However, monsters you control cannot attack for the rest of the turn. You can also banish this card from your grave to add any of those Sacred Beasts from your deck to your hand. Now, this card came out a long time before the rest of the Lesser Beasts, but being a level 5 monster was still too restrictive for anyone to give it a shot. But now that Dark Beckoning Beast can act as tribute fodder, a way to search Dark Summoning Beast, and a way to give you an extra tribute summon, this card has become much better. Now any of your Sacred Beasts can be accessed at the drop of a hat, while also getting to add one of them from your deck to your hand, so Chaos Summoning Beast can field it. It truly is a tribute to how far this theme has come. But we've got more than just a bounty of beasts. We also got a slew of signature attack and anime reference cards that are absolutely bonkers, bringing their power more in line with what they were in GX and tacking on a little extra power just in case. First is Raviel, Lord of Phantasm's Shimmering Scraper. It has all the same stats as Raviel proper, but when it comes to its special summon, you can tribute any 3 monsters, not just fiends. But like the other signature attack cards, this isn't meant to be a replacement, rather it works as a companion. Because as a quick effect, you can discard this card and target an original Raviel you control, and for the rest of the turn, its attack becomes double its current attack. Also, it can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. 8,000 is a terrifying amount of attack to put on a multi-attacker, and that's before it's done any boosting, because it doubles its current attack, not its original. So even if you just tribute one of the Phantasm tokens, Raviel jumps up to 10,000 after the doubling. Normally you have to summon a fusion monster for something that big. And if you're worried about not having Shimmering Scraper at the right time, then no sweat, because while it's in the grave, you can tribute a monster to add this card to your hand. Now, in the past, this all would have been a moot point considering how difficult Raviel is to summon, but now you can put them on board with a single activation of Dark Summoning Beast, and if you bring them out via Chaos Summoning Beast instead, you get to keep the battle phase, and you can end the game out of nowhere. Even if you're in a game state you'd lose by all other accounts, this card can really help you just barely scrape by. Cerulean Skyfire is a continuous spell that allows you to send face-down spell cards you control to the grave for the special summoning procedure of Hamon. Not generally helpful, most people can put their continuous spells face up if need be, but I guess it's nice if you're stuck under anti-spell fragrance. And once per turn, while you control an attack position Hamon, you can negate a spell or trap effect activated by your opponent, then change one of your Hamons to defense position. Note that this effect does not have a colon anywhere in it, meaning this effect does not activate. So if a chain is resolving and you want to say no to a particular spell or trap effect, just turn Hamon sideways and it's gone. Heck, this means it can even stop counter traps, which is pretty wild. And if any of your face-up Sacred Beasts leave the field, Cerulean Skyfire keeps you from taking damage that turn. While all of this is really telegraphed due to its continuous spell nature, Cerulean Skyfire gives you something very important: negation. While it doesn't stop monsters, it does insulate your plays from other interaction, and can even gum up your opponent's game plan if you hit them at the right time, which I'm sure will leave them more than a little blue. Hyper Blaze is a continuous trap that allows you to send face-down trap cards you control to the grave for the special summoning procedure of Uriah. Now that's much more helpful. And once per battle, when an attack is declared involving Uriah, you can send a trap card from your hand or deck to the grave, and Uriah's attack and defense become equal to the number of face-up traps on the field and in the grave times 1,000 for the rest of the turn. You can send a trap card from your hand or deck to the grave, and Uriah's attack and defense become equal to the number of face-up traps on the field and in the grave times 1,000 for the rest of the turn. This means you don't actually have to commit to running a bunch of continuous traps in your deck if you don't want to. With Hyper Blaze, you can gain attack from traps you might already be using, like Infinite Impermanence and Dimensional Barrier. And once per turn, you can discard a card to add to your hand or special summon one of your Sacred Beasts from your grave, ignoring summoning conditions. Now, you won't be able to revive Sacred Beasts that have not already been properly summoned, but being able to trade a card in your hand for a Sacred Beast so that Chaos Summoning Beast can handle it is still pretty helpful. And that's no hyperbole. Now it's time for a bit more generic support. Opening of the Spirit Gates is a continuous spell that, when activated, adds a Sacred Beast, or a monster that specifically lists any of them in its text, from your deck to your hand. And once per turn, you can discard a card to special summon a Fiend monster with 0 attack and defense from your grave. And once per turn, if you control a level 10 monster, you can add a continuous spell from your grave to your hand. Dang, talk about your powerful engine pieces. This searches any sacred or lesser beast, so you can fill the gaps in a lot of opening hands. It can also revive your lesser beasts, and once everything is established, you get to add a free card from your grave to your hand. So you can either get back another Spirit Gates for more searching, a Cerulean Skyfire for negation, or any number of utility continuous spells you want to play. It truly is the gateway to the rest of your theme. Fallen Paradise is a field spell that keeps your opponent from targeting your Sacred Beasts and Armatael in your monster zone from card effects, nor can they be destroyed by your opponent's card effects while you control them. And if you control any of those monsters in your monster zone, you can just draw 2 cards. Yeah, once you set up even one of your bosses, you just get a +2 every turn. Like Dark Summoning Beast, this was available before the structure deck, but it's much better now that those cards plus you, instead of making up for all the minuses in getting those Sacred Beasts onto the field. And on top of everything else, it keeps your monsters from being removed easily, and since many of them have a lot of attack power, your opponent won't have much recourse but to deal with Fallen Paradise first. And with a bit of negation from Cerulean Skyfire, that's not gonna be easy either. Also, it looks like we're getting some more of that Judeo-Christian symbolism, what with the apple and the reference to Paradise Lost. Glad to see they're doing more with the premise and branching out. Awakening of the Sacred Beasts is a continuous trap card that gains the following effects based on the number of different Sacred Beasts you control. With 1 or more, each time your opponent normal or special summons any number of monsters, you gain life points equal to those monsters' attacks. With 2 or more, you negate the activated effects of all monsters your opponent controls, and if you control all 3, any monsters sent to your opponent's grave are banished instead. And like Spirit Gates, if you control a level 10 monster, you can grab a card from your grave once per turn, and in this case, it's a continuous trap card. This is a floodgate of wildly differing power depending on how far you can establish a board. With only a single Sacred Beast, it's little more than a way to keep you from getting OTK'd. But once you have the second, it's a veritable one-sided skill drain. And being a Dimension Fusion on top of that once you have the whole crew together is just icing on the cake. Not to mention that continuous traps tend to be floodgates, so if any of yours get cleaned up, Awakening can pick them out of the graveyard once you have a level 10, so you can deploy them once again. Just make sure you don't play this card past their bedtime, because the Sacred Beasts get very cranky after being rudely awakened. Dimension Fusion Destruction is a normal spell that lets you banish from your hand, field, and/or grave the fusion materials listed on a Phantasm Fusion monster, then you special summon that fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring summoning conditions, and you take no battle damage from attacks involving the monster special summoned by this effect. And if you control any of the Sacred Beasts, your opponent can't activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. This is why you might want to consider running Chaos Core. You can throw all the material into the grave, then Miracle Fusion out a gigantic bungler without having to spend all that time trying to get the component monsters onto the field. Though summoning at least one to keep it from being responded to is extremely helpful for pushing through a big negation board. Now, we don't have a way to target Chaos Core on a theme, so we'll have to look off theme for assistance. Though once you do pull off this summon, since it keeps you from taking battle damage in battles involving the summoned monster, even if you don't one-shot your opponent with Archetype, your opponent can't punish you on the crackback. So there's definitely going to be a lot of destruction going on, just not for you. But you'll notice it can fusion summon any Phantasm Fusion monster, and that's because we now have more than one target. Archetype the Chaos Phantasm Phantom of Fury is a level 12 Dark Fiend Fusion monster with 0 attack and defense, requiring the 3 Sacred Beasts as material, whose name becomes Archetype the Chaos Phantasm while on the field. Once per turn, during your main phase, you can give control of this card to your opponent, which, seems unorthodox, but during the end phase, if this card's control is changed this turn, all cards you control are banished, which at this point means your opponent. Then the owner of this card can special summon an Archetype the Chaos Phantasm from your extra deck, ignoring summoning conditions. You won't have the chance to swing in for 10,000 damage because, well, it's the end phase, but you'll have forced your opponent to rebuild from an empty board. And you can summon your Archetype in defense position so you don't take any damage from anything they do summon. Well, anything without piercing. Then, once it comes back around to your turn, you change Archetype to attack position, use some cards to clean up the field, and swing in for game. An excellent way to make sure your opponent is absolutely furious. But wait, there's more. We also get Phantasm Emperor Trilojig, a level 10 Dark Fiend Fusion monster with 4,000 attack and defense, requiring any 3 level 10 monsters. If this card is special summoned, or if another monster is special summoned from the grave to your field while you control this monster, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and inflict damage to your opponent equal to half its original attack. Now, if you're looking at this card and thinking, hey, I don't remember this card from the anime, then don't worry, your memory isn't faulty. It's actually from the manga. The arc V manga, to be precise. Eve, one of the main antagonists of the manga, uses several monsters that reference previous spin-offs, one of which is Phantasm Emperor Trilojig. Now, I'm not quite sure how this connects to the Sacred Beasts outside of the name, but honestly having a way to summon a 4,000 attack beater that can also do some significant effect damage, potentially ending the game on the spot, is a welcome option. In fact, if it ever gets me out of a particularly tight jam, I'd feel inclined to dance a little Trilojig. Okay, so that's all the Sacred Beast cards, but what do we do with them? Well, it looks like we're armed to do a little bit of everything. We've got gigantic monsters and several means of stopping our opponent's plays, though we do need to make sure our field is set up to do so. So I'm inclined to say we're a mid-range deck focusing on control. We want to keep our opponent on the back foot for a turn or two, then swing in with a swath of monsters to close things out all at once. But what can we play to help them out? Well, before we get too deep into those, I wanted to mention a few cards that are related to our theme, but don't really work with us specifically. Bridge of Salvation mentions level 10 monsters, and it does have Archetype in the card art, but this is much more of a Crystal Beast card than a Sacred Beast one. Like, what, I'm supposed to shuffle away my whole field after summoning so many Sacred Beasts? And both Phantom of Chaos and Mad Reloader are used by Yubel in various ways, but their effects are so generic that you could plug them into a lot of decks and they'd work just the same. A level 10 monster with a lot of utility that's easy to summon, which means you can get Spirit Gates and Awakening's Graveyard Recursion effect online easily, is, Eldritch. While Spirit Gates has a lot of cool effects, if you aren't using them, it's an easy card to send from the field for their summon, and if you have another Spirit Gates, you can just add it right back, or get back Cursed Eldland to access more of your deck. And same goes for if you need to pitch some of those cards from hand for Eldlich's removal effect. Unfortunately, a lot of Floodgates just do not gel with us very well. If we had the anime characteristics, all of our Sacred Beasts would be Divine Attribute, Divine Beast type monsters, so Rivalry and Gozen match would be excellent. But now, that's not going to cut it. However, Summon Limit ain't half bad. You normal summon Chaos Summoning Beast, then trade it out for a Sacred Beast in your hand. And if you ever want to turn it off, or any continuous trap Floodgate, just send it away for Uriah. I joked about how Yubel was kind of shoehorned together with these Sacred Beasts because of anime nonsense, but they're a legit target for Spirit Gate's revival effect. If you tech in a way to destroy it, or if you expect your opponent will have a way to do it instead of some other kind of removal, they'll be a tough wall to crack once you get them to Nightmare mode. Field Barrier might be up your alley. Since Fallen Paradise keeps your Sacred Beast safe, Barrier can keep the tree safe. And it's another recurable target for Spirit Gates. However, if you want something with a bit more versatility, try Blockout Curtain. You can destroy it in place of any of your cards being destroyed, and if your opponent is playing the kind of deck that likes destroying their own cards, you can banish this card from your grave to prevent that. So next time your Sword Soul opponent tries to pop their own Yazi for a summon, they'll be in for a nasty surprise. As for a silly tech pick, try Prohibition. This is a very finicky card and should likely stay in the side, but if you can read your opponent correctly, you can keep them off of their best plays. You can activate it prematurely to stop a hand trap before going into your combos, or use it to forbid a particularly useful card of your opponent's for their play sequences. And if it gets destroyed, you can just bring it back with Spirit Gates, and if you want to change the selected card, you can send it to the grave for Haman, then Spirit Gates just scoops it right back up. And that's all I have to say about Sacred Beasts. I'm not gonna lie, without the help of the new structure deck, this archetype wouldn't be worth a second glance. Their summoning conditions are brutal and their payoffs are ghastly. But with the help of some amazing pieces of support, these beasts of brutality can handle the aggro while the rest of your deck props them up. Between the draws, the negation, and the protection, victory will be forever in your grasp. Unless your opponent starts using non-targeting, non-destruction removal, the heathens. Seriously, is nothing sacred anymore? But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are the Sacred Beasts the final bosses we all knew they could be? Or are they gonna need a few more levels? Let me know in the comments, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like this video and subscribe to show your support, ring that bell so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with someone you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode was brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commander, Ashlyn Waltz, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, Ava Gule, Adam Zagidel, Benjamin Meisner, Biohazard 011, Cryptic Gamer, Eric, Frankie, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh!, Gloomba 331, Great Big Pillock, Howling Zangetsu, Inblink, Ironic, John Manji, Julius Sneezer, Larakia, Mighty Action X, Meteornus, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Ruxith Sarani, Shooting Star 3300, The Fresh Prince of Conair, The Wizard Moose, Tyler Cranston and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders, Bear Sharktopus Studios, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Cozy Boat 275, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Jesus Garcia, Manga Pages, Marion James E. Picata, Nitromo, RGS, Rem T. Bright, Star-Lord 777, and the Legendary Raven, as well as the wonderful Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. I'm only able to continue doing this thanks to the support of these lovely people, so if you'd like to be a part of these credits, as well as help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, please check out my YouTube membership or Patreon links in the description to see if I have anything you'd like on offer. And if you want to hear me talk about another band of evil deities, check out this video I made covering Earthbound Immortals. And if you want to see two Yugi tubers going at it, check out Noah Jenkinai's latest series Progression Polls, where your voice shapes the format. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.